Have you ever felt it? That profound moment of awakening, perhaps after a significant spiritual insight or a period of intense personal challenge, where suddenly everything shifted. You pierce the veil of illusion. You recognize the repetitive patterns, the deafening noise of the everyday, and then a profound silence. Initially, this silence felt like a superpower, didn't it? A deep well of empowerment. But then, almost imperceptibly, that vibrant sense of meaning began to fade, not in a dramatic, crashing wave, but quietly, as if your very soul had gently turned down the volume on life and then somehow forgot to turn it back up. You found yourself no longer chasing, no longer driven by the old anxieties or desires, not in a destructive way, but with a quiet, existential sigh, a sense of profound stillness. And within that stillness, a question began to echo, growing louder in the quiet chambers of your heart. After finally grasping a deeper truth, do I feel so strangely numb, so adrift? It's a bewildering paradox, isn't it? We imagine spiritual awakening as a glorious sunrise, igniting our passions and setting our souls ablaze with purpose. Yet, for so many sensitive, introspective individuals, the empaths, the seekers of truth, it can usher in an unexpected emptiness, a hollowing out. This experience, this sacred pause, can feel incredibly isolating, but you are not alone in this. Do you wish to attract positivity and good vibrations into your life? Comment below to affirm your desire for good things and to join our collective intention for a brighter path. And please tap like if you're ready to welcome these positive energies. I recall a dear friend, a wonderfully insightful woman, deeply attuned to spiritual wisdom, who had immersed herself in countless books on enlightenment. After navigating her own dark night of the soul, she experienced a monumental awakening. She got it, she said. She saw through the charade of the constructed self, the ego's relentless pursuit of external validation and fleeting success. And yet, just a couple of months later, she found herself staring blankly at her ceiling, struggling to find the will to even leave her bed. She confided in me, her voice laced with confusion. I used to despair over not achieving enough, over not being enough. Now I barely care whether I accomplish anything at all. I truly believe this awakening would illuminate my path, fill me with an unshakable joy, not leave me feeling so vacant. This phenomenon, this curious spiritual desert that can follow profound insight, was something the great mystic and psychic Edgar Cayce often alluded to in his teachings. He may not have used today's trendy spiritual jargon, but he possessed profound understanding of what occurs when the deeper aspects of our consciousness begin to stir and reorient our lives. Cayce suggested that true spiritual growth often involves periods where we must confront the disquieting shadows within, the parts of ourselves we've long ignored. He taught that enlightenment isn't solely about imagining beings of pure light, but about courageously meeting self, making our own hidden darkness conscious. This concept sounds inspiring, even poetic, until you are standing in the midst of that very process. Be sure to stay with us, because as our journey unfolds, we'll uncover perspective on this spiritual emptiness that might truly surprise you. Awakening, you see, isn't always the blissful endpoint we anticipate. Often, it is a profound, bewildering beginning of a kind of psychological and spiritual unmaking. The dissolution of who you mistakenly thought you were. The familiar structures that once gave your life shape and meaning, your goals, your career, even your most cherished relationships, and your very perception of time, can feel as though they are crumbling away. But what if this crumbling is not an ending, but a necessary clearing for something far more authentic to emerge? And as these old structures begin to dissolve, what then? This is where the path can feel most uncertain, leading many to question the very nature of their spiritual journey. What truly happens when the old motivations fade before new ones have taken root? We're about to explore this very sacred, often misunderstood interim. So, what is truly unfolding within you during this perplexing void, this spiritual intermission? It's crucial to understand that the part of you that once directed your life, what some might call the personality or the everyday conscious mind, isn't suddenly vanquished by an awakening. Instead, it finds itself profoundly bewildered. Imagine a seasoned captain who has navigated by a particular set of stars for their entire career, only to find those stars have vanished from the sky. The old map is useless, The familiar coordinates no longer apply, and without a new chart, a new way to navigate, the ship of your motivation seems to drift aimlessly in a vast, silent ocean. So, it's not necessarily that you're clinically depressed or that you irretrievably lost your drive. It's more akin to being in a state of profound limbo. You have awakened from something, the illusions, the old patterns, the sleep of unconscious living, but you haven't yet fully awakened into what comes next. And here is where the experience becomes both deeply fascinating and, regrettably, so widely misunderstood by our fast-paced world. That profound sense of stillness, even emptiness, that you might be grappling with right now, it isn't a sign of spiritual failure. It's not a regression, nor is it necessarily anxiety or depression in the way we typically define them. Instead, it is something ancient, something sacred, a process that spiritual traditions throughout history have recognized as profoundly significant. The visionary Edgar Cayce, in his own way, spoke to the importance of such periods of inner recalibration. He consistently highlighted that our modern world, with its relentless emphasis on outward activity and constant productivity, often pressures us to avoid, or even pathologize, this essential phase of inner quietude, this sacred pause, this seemingly empty void, this in-between state of being. Cayce's teaching suggests this is not a void to be feared, but a fertile ground for the soul. He believed that such periods were not only necessary, but absolutely essential for true spiritual unfoldment, for the soul to process, integrate, and ultimately align more closely with its divine purpose, its spiritual ideal. It's a pivotal part of the journey towards becoming the authentic, soul-guided individual you were always meant to be. Yet, how many of us are ever truly prepared for this part of the awakening journey? It's rarely spoken of in the popular narratives of spiritual enlightenment, which often focus only on the blissful peaks. And that is precisely why we need to explore more deeply, to understand what is genuinely occurring in the depths of your psyche after that initial, breathtaking awakening. We need to ask how this apparent loss of motivation, this disconcerting quiet, might actually be the threshold to one of the most significant spiritual upgrades you could ever experience, if only you can learn to understand its profound, hidden purpose. The external world may not recognize this sacred stillness, but your soul knows its importance. It's a quiet recalibration, a drawing inward before new, more authentic outward expression. But how does this profound internal shift actually begin to reshape our everyday lives, our desires, and even our very understanding of who we are? The next part of our journey will illuminate this very transformation. So, if you have found yourself adrift in that perplexing post-awakening calm, wondering where your familiar spark and drive have disappeared to, please know this. You are not adrift without reason. You are undergoing a profound psychological and spiritual metamorphosis, a recalibration. So deep it doesn't just alter your thoughts. It begins to reprogram the very operating system of your being. All those ambitions you once diligently pursued, the meticulously crafted to-do lists, the ambitious 5-year plans, the cultural chorus urging you to constantly hustle, they simply don't resonate with the same intensity anymore, do they? This isn't because you are failing or faltering. It's because the very foundation of your old motivation system is undergoing a necessary and transformative collapse. Think of it this way. For much of your life, your primary motivation likely stemmed from what we might call your personality-driven identity. The me you believed yourself to be. You sought to prove your worth, to be acknowledged, to achieve success, to be cherished and loved. These are not inherently negative motivations. They are often natural stages of human development, part of how we learn to navigate the world. Edgar Cayce, in his teachings, often spoke of the personality as distinct from the deeper individuality or soul self. The personality wears various masks, adapting to societal expectations to function and gain acceptance. However, the awakening process is like a gentle but persistent hand that begins to lift these masks. Suddenly, the old game of seeking external approval or tirelessly trying to, according to worldly standards, loses its appeal, primarily because you now see the game itself with newfound clarity. And this is precisely where things can feel particularly disorienting. Without the familiar masks, your old goals, ambitions, and desires often feel ill-fitting, like garments tailored for a version of you that no longer truly exists. You may feel like an actor who has suddenly stepped off the stage during a play, realizing their memorized lines and rehearsed actions no longer have any context or meaning. This is a core reason why you might feel unmotivated. It's not that your intrinsic drive has vanished, but rather that you've outgrown the type of fuel that once powered it. Edgar Cayce's extensive work guides us to understand that our earthly journey is not merely about serving the whims of the personality or the ego. Instead, we are here to grow the soul, to align our conscious self with something far greater, a deeper spiritual purpose. He often referred to this as striving towards our ideal, a spiritual blueprint or pattern chosen by the soul. This journey is about transforming from a fragmented, personality-driven existence into a more whole, unified self, guided by that soul-level center within you, that sacred core that connects you to the divine and all of life. This deeper self, this true individuality, isn't particularly concerned with fleeting status, external accolades, or even a constant need for absolute clarity on every matter. Its primary impetus is to express truth, to live authentically, to unfold its unique spiritual essence. Therefore, once a significant spiritual awakening occurs, your entire being begins an intricate process of recalibration. It starts, often quite subtly at first, to reject anything that feels inauthentic, forced, or predominantly ego-based. This can include career paths, relationships, long-held ambitions, even that beautifully crafted vision board from a few years ago. This is why the awakening process is so often described as simultaneously liberating and profoundly disorienting. It's a shedding of the old to make space for the new, but this shedding can leave us feeling bare and uncertain. What happens when we consciously or unconsciously resist this natural unfolding, or try to cling to the comfort of those old, dissolving structures? The consequences of this resistance are key to understanding the next part of our journey. However, Edgar Cayce's teachings, much like other profound spiritual philosophies, would caution that if our journey of awakening leads us to a full stop in this disorienting void, we risk becoming stuck. It's a subtle but significant pitfall. Some individuals, upon awakening to the illusory nature of their old reality, fall into a kind of spiritual inertia, convincing themselves that nothing truly matters, that all is merely illusion. They may disconnect, float in a detached haze, and emotionally numb out, mistaking this disengagement for true spiritual detachment. But the deeper self, the soul, yearns for something more profound. It desires to live through you, to animate your human experience with its wisdom, to bring a touch of the divine into this earthly existence. The goal isn't to reject the world, but to fundamentally redefine your role within it, transforming your participation from one of unconscious reaction to conscious co-creation. To truly step into this new way of being, however, often requires passage through that perplexing middle phase, a period few recognize for what it truly is while they are immersed in it. There's a stage after the initial awakening that is rarely glamorized. It doesn't feature in idyllic images of mountaintop meditations or profound, shareable quotes. More often, it looks like this: sitting in quiet stillness, perhaps unable to fully articulate your inner state, while the world outside continues its relentless, noisy rush. In these moments, Edgar Cayce's perspective would affirm that you are not lost. You are simply in between. You've begun to disidentify from the personality-driven ego, but you haven't yet fully anchored into a new way of living from the soul, from your true spiritual ideal. This space, this pause, is not a sign of failure. It is a sacred rite of passage. Yet, in our hyperproductive, excellently focused society, such profound stillness is frequently misdiagnosed as laziness, this essential pause mistaken for an inexplicable paralysis. And so, you might judge yourself harshly, and that very judgment can block the gentle, guiding energy your soul is patiently trying to call back into your awareness, to continue inviting enlightenment and the flow of good things into your journey. Comment "Hope" below as a personal affirmation for continued illumination and positive happenings. This profound psychological and spiritual pause is akin to what ancient wisdom traditions recognized as the hermit phase, or the symbolic death that must precede a true rebirth. It's the caterpillar's dissolution within the chrysalis. Not yet a butterfly, no longer a caterpillar, but a seemingly formless potential. And yes, this state of formless potential doesn't tick off items on a to-do list. It doesn't hustle. It dissolves. It surrenders. This is precisely where the personality-driven ego often panics. It craves action, identity, and clear direction. But the deeper self, the soul, whispers patiently, "Let go. Trust this process. I am building something far deeper, far more resilient." This is often where some superficial spiritual approaches miss the mark, advocating only for high vibes or instructing you to simply follow your joy, without acknowledging the profound alchemy that occurs in the quiet, sometimes shadowy depths. While intention and cultivating positive energy are undeniably important, Edgar Cayce's work consistently emphasized the necessity of meeting self, courageously facing and integrating those repressed, uncomfortable, or shadow aspects of your being. This is not an optional extra credit assignment in the school of life. It is a core curriculum for any soul genuinely committed to becoming whole. This sacred emptiness you might feel is a space where the subconscious, with all its hidden patterns and potentials, finally has room to rise to the surface to be understood, healed, and integrated. You are not failing. You are metabolizing lifetimes of experience. Your soul, in its infinite wisdom, may even orchestrate a temporary stalling of your familiar motivations, your usual drive, even your access to mental clarity. Precisely so you are compelled to feel, to witness, and to reclaim the buried fragments of your true self. This, dear friend, is the real transformative work. But what happens when we cease resisting this inner call to stillness? When we allow ourselves to truly enter this sacred void, a remarkable shift begins, often in the most unexpected of ways, heralding a new kind of inner movement. And here lies a truly beautiful and often unexpected turning point in this sacred journey. When you cease to resist the quiet call to void, when you allow yourself to simply be in that space of inner stillness without judgment or fear, something remarkable begins to happen. Slowly, gently, motivation does start to return. But this time, it feels fundamentally different. It's not the anxious, striving energy of your past. It's not performative, seeking applause or validation. It isn't the relentless, exhausting hustle glorified by the external world. Instead, it is something far older, infinitely quieter, yet profoundly powerful, a kind of soul-led movement, an inner stirring that feels more like remembering a long-forgotten path than frantically chasing a new one. Edgar Cayce spoke eloquently of this as the emergence of the divine within, the awakening of the Christ consciousness as a living, breathing inner compass, guiding your steps. So, imagine you walk through that valley of shadows. You experience the deep silence, the profound stillness, the necessary pause. And now, something new, something exquisitely tender, is beginning to stir within the depths of your being. It's not a dramatic thunderbolt, nor a dazzling display of fireworks. It's far more subtle, a quiet, persistent inner pull, not necessarily urging you to return the clamor of your old life, but inviting you to co-create a new one built on a foundation of authentic truth and soul alignment. This is a sacred space where your true self, your soul, begins to communicate more clearly. Not always in explicit words or grand visions, but through gentle nudges, feelings of deep resonance, and what Edgar Cayce often highlighted as the symbolic life. He taught that once the personality begins to surrender its dominance and align with the soul's purpose, once the subconscious patterns are brought into the light of understanding and integrated, we become capable of living from a place far deeper and more authentic than mere personality. This is a pivotal shift where life ceases to be solely about survival and transforms into a quest for profound meaning and heartfelt purpose. And here's an encouraging insight. When this deeper self begins to lead, the path forward is often beautifully, surprisingly ordinary. You find you don't need to hustle. Instead, you learn to respond with grace to life's unfolding. You're no longer motivated by a fear of missing out on what others deem important. Rather, you're gently guided by an inner sense of what feels truly aligned with your spirit. You cease the frantic chase for clarity, and instead, you cultivate the wisdom to recognize it when it quietly arrives. Living from this soul-centered place doesn't guarantee you'll always feel motivated in the conventional, high-energy sense. You might still experience waves of weariness, moments of confusion, or even tides of grief. These are all part of the rich tapestry of being human. But what you won't feel is that draining, constant sense of inner betrayal, that exhausting feeling of dragging yourself through a life that simply doesn't fit your soul. Instead, you may begin to notice a spontaneous urge to create, even when no one is watching. You'll find yourself saying no with quiet confidence to opportunities that don't resonate with your core, even if they appear attractive on the surface. You'll start to follow the gentle whispers of your curiosity rather than the rigid demands of your old checklist. You'll choose inner peace over outward performance, time and time again. This, dear friend, is a new fuel. It's not adrenaline, it's alignment. Edgar Cayce deeply valued this way of living symbolically, not in a world of fantasy, but with a soul deeply connected to its source, learning to trust your inner imagery, your dreams, those meaningful coincidences or synchronicities, and your intuitive gut feelings as reliable forms of divine guidance. But how do we practically cultivate this new way of being? How do we translate these subtle inner nudges into tangible choices that shape a life of deeper meaning and authentic expression? We'll explore the gentle art of this soul-led navigation next. So, how does this soul-led way of living actually manifest in your day-to-day experience? What does it look like in practical terms? Sometimes, it's as beautifully simple as beginning to ask different kind of questions instead of the personality's anxious query. What should I do to fix this or achieve that? You might find yourself gently inquiring from a deeper space. What is quietly calling to me now? What is mine to do in alignment with my soul's purpose? Instead of demanding, what's a grand plan to guaranteed outcome? You might ask, where's life? Where's spirit lovingly nudging me in this moment? And rather than the old, exhausting pattern of, how can I prove myself to the world? The soul's honest whisper emerges. What feels most true, most authentic, most resonant with my deepest values right now? You begin to shift from trying to dominate or control life to gracefully participating with its mysterious and sacred flow. This transformation doesn't necessarily mean abandoning all ambition. Rather, it means profoundly transmuting it. Ambition born of ego often craves applause and control, but ambition reborn from soul becomes a heartfelt devotion. A devotion to living in truth, to being fully present in each unfolding moment, and to embracing a continuous journey of spiritual growth and service. And the wonderful irony is that this kind of soul-centered, purpose-driven energy often accomplishes far more and with greater grace and ease than the forceful striving of the ego ever could. Because now, your efforts are sustainable. They are, as Edgar Cayce's teachings affirm, quite literally soul-powered, drawing from an inexhaustible divine source. This is a motivation of the awakened self, not to impress the world, but to express its unique essence, to share its innate gifts. And this authentic expression often leads you, quite naturally, to create, to serve, to heal, to teach, and to build in ways that contribute to the greater good. Not because an external voice says you should, but because your entire being resonates with profound, unwavering yes. So, if you've been feeling as though your familiar spark has dimmed or vanished after your spiritual awakening, please consider this. It may be that the old, superficial fire, fueled by ego and external validation, simply needed to burn down. This was necessary to make space for a deeper, more resilient flame to be kindled within you, an inner light that doesn't flicker or fade when inevitable winds of external change blow. The path of profound spiritual awakening and integration, as illuminated by mystics like Edgar Cayce, was never promised to be perpetually easy or effortlessly blissful. If you are here, reflecting on these words, you're already bravely walking that sacred path. It's not about desperately trying to reclaim your old, familiar motivation. It's about courageously discovering a new and far more profound source of inspiration, one that is deeply rooted in spiritual wholeness, not in fleeting performance or external approval. If this journey of reflection and discovery speaks to your heart, supporting us with a like and subscribing to the channel allows us to continue sharing these inspiring explorations together. This isn't the culmination of your awakening. It is, in truth, the very beginning of your most authentic becoming. This journey of becoming, of allowing the soul to lead, is a continuous unfolding. What, then, is the ultimate invitation to this profound shift? And how can we consciously embrace it as we move forward in our daily lives, carrying this newfound awareness, this journey of inner transformation, this sacred passage from a life directed by the outer personality to one gently guided by the inner soul, is indeed a continuous and profound unfolding. The ultimate invitation of this profound shift is to consciously and lovingly embrace the entirety of your being, the light, the shadows, the stillness, and the quiet, emerging whispers of your authentic self. It is an invitation to live from a place of deep integrity, where your inner truth and your outer expression become increasingly harmonized. Remember, that period of feeling adrift, that disconcerting quietude after a spiritual awakening, was never a sign of regression or failure. It was, and perhaps still is for you, a sacred chrysalis phase, a testament to your soul's courage to dissolve old limitations and prepare for a more expansive, meaningful existence. The teachings of Edgar Cayce consistently remind us that such periods of intense inner recalibration are not only natural, but are divinely orchestrated for our ultimate growth, serving to polish the soul and draw us ever closer to our spiritual ideal, our unique divine pattern. This profound process allows us to shed the accumulated dross of past conditioning and misaligned intentions, making way for the true radiance of our inner divinity to shine forth more brightly. It's about learning to trust the inherent wisdom of your own soul, that still, small voice within, which Cayce so often encouraged individuals to cultivate and heed. As you continue to navigate this path, you'll find that the motivation which now stirs within you is not a fleeting whim, but a deep, abiding resonance with life itself. It is a desire to contribute, to love, to learn, and to grow, not from a place of lack or needing to prove, but from a wellspring of inner fullness and connection to something far greater than the isolated self. This is the essence of becoming, a gentle moment-by-moment alignment with the soul's deepest aspirations. There will be days of effortless flow and clarity, and there may still be days that require patience and quiet introspection. Both are sacred parts of the journey. Embrace the unfolding with an open heart, knowing that you are not merely returning to an old state, but are being reborn into a new consciousness, one that is more compassionate, more aware, and more deeply connected to the web of all existence. The initial fire of awakening may have startled you, and the subsequent quiet may have perplexed you, but the enduring flame that now begins to glow within is one of sustainable peace, authentic purpose, and unwavering love. This is the true gift of persevering through the sacred void. As we reflect on our shared journey and the profound interconnectedness of all things, the understanding that though our paths are individual, our spiritual essence is united. Comment, we are connected below to affirm this universal truth with our community. And your exploration doesn't have to end here. Click the video now appearing on your screen for another powerful message designed to support and inspire your continued spiritual growth.